We're going to have a competition. Oh my goodness. We're going to have a competition with technology now. It's going to be very exciting. I'm going to try to play you some images at the same time as talk, and we may get out of time. So should we begin? Right. Now, I was here many years ago, and the school seems to have changed a great deal since I was here. It's got bigger and younger. When I was here, the youngest person was about 7½, and now I think if we don't consider the nursery, the youngest Signet is 3. And on the screen I'm going to show you some drawings that I've done, and I'm going to talk about words, some of them in English, some of them in Latin, some of them in Greek. But mostly I'm going to talk about animals. The first drawing is something you should all recognize. I tried drawing this about 40 years ago, and I got advice from 2 great artists here. If you switch off all the lights, I can't see anything. I got advice from 2 great artists here, Father Gervase Duffy, whose Stations of the Cross are in the cloister, and a wonderful English teacher called Mr. Kingdon, who was probably the most dramatic teacher I think I ever knew. He used to read us the 39 steps, and he would start by standing on the table and finish by climbing up the blackboard and halfway up the wall. Very exciting. Now, Father Duffy told me I should never worry about how long it takes to draw something. I should be patient. And Mr. Kingdon told me that I should always do what I wanted to do, that I should be original. So those 2 ideas, to be patient and to be original, and this is a tribute to the lessons that I learnt then. I have very fond memories of my time here, as I'm sure you will have too when you leave. I remember, oh lovely, I remember one big drama when the farmer left the gate open and the cows walked onto the rugby field, leaving a lot of smelly evidence behind that I'm sure somebody would have cleaned up. In those days, this was a boarding school, and we wrote letters home every Sunday, which was a little bit boring for me because I sometimes found it difficult to think of things to say. My students say I don't have that problem anymore, but I have promised the headmaster that I will not speak for more than 15 minutes, so do not worry. But I found this letter, which I wrote in 1971 when I was 10 years old. You can do the mathematics. I think I was trying to show off what a huge vocabulary I had then. The farmer, I wrote, the farmer came into the school grounds to round up the cows. That bit so far, so good. After all his work, he was very tedious. A word I clearly did not understand well. I must have thought the word tedious meant tired. My mother occasionally would say to me when I was talking too much, "Stop being so tedious, Tim." Does anybody know what the word tedious means? Oh, come on, someone must know. Yes? No. Anybody else over here? Yes? Boring! Yes, I'm going to try not to be too tedious. We always need to learn a new word every day if we possibly can. Maybe we can pause for a moment. Now, actually, no, we can continue. I have 2 cats. Does anybody here have pets at home? Oh, we've got some nice pet owners. Good. Now, also, I think you've got alpacas here, haven't you? And sometimes you make little trips to the alpacas. Well, in fact, if we wait, I've got some alpacas which will turn up here. These are my cats. I have 2 of them. They're very noisy. This one is stretching here. I don't know much about alpacas. I think they're very soft, very sweet. I want to ask you a question about another animal. Has anybody looked after goats? Has anybody got a pet goat at home? One? Yes, there we are, you see. Aren't they wonderful? I looked after goats for nearly a year. They can be a little bit smelly, not like alpacas. They're very intelligent goats. Strange eyes. Actually, I looked after a few sheep as well, but the goats really had the edge. I know in the Bible, we learn that the sheep and the goats are divided. The sheep go one way, to heaven, and the goats go the other way, to hell. In my experience, though, the goats all went one way, and the sheep all went the same way. I had 2 white sheep in a herd of 100 goats. Actually, you don't call it a herd, you call it a tribe in English. So I had 2 white sheep in a tribe of 100 black goats. I don't know how they got there, but they were monumentally stupid. If it was possible for the sheep to get stuck, they got stuck. If it was possible for them to get lost, they got lost. And it was always the sheep that gave the game away. Imagine, oh, here's one of them. Imagine I was in the morning going up the mountainside to try and find my sheep. And I'd see some innocent-looking olive trees. This was Greece, almost an orchard, and underneath the olive trees, there were the 2 sheep, bleating. And above them, hiding in the trees, were 100 goats, trying not to be found. Now, goats, I don't know how much you know about goats. One person is an authority, but goats all have distinctive voices. Here they are. Unlike sheep. Sheep all sound exactly the same. But goats make very personal noises, not always from the front end. But each goat is original. And actually, when I got back to England from my time in Greece and went back to teaching in a school in London, I thought there were many similarities between teaching children and looking after goats. Now, there's a big difference between the way we shepherd or goat herd sheep in this country and the way they still do it in Greece. Because here we tend to herd the animals. If we've got a tractor, we get behind the tractor, we motor away, and we drive the sheep into the shed. That's probably where we get the name Shep Shed from. Or if we have a dog, we bark at the sheep. But in the south of Greece, in the Peloponnese near Sparta, isn't that a magnificent image? Make you think of ancient Greece. The technique is different, and I learnt this. I used to lead the animals. I would call the animals. My goats came to me when I called them by name. Look, Irini, Elias, Ella. I named all the goats after people I knew in my little village. This was in Greece, so most of the boys were called Dimitri. Some of them were called George. Is anyone called George? There you are. Some of them were called Sophia. Quite a lot of them were called Sophia. Anybody called Sophia? Yes, you see. 2. And there was one called Poppy who used to bite me. Is anyone called Poppy? No, I think that's too much. And Sophia is a great name. It means clever. So these 2 girls should be very pleased with that. It means wisdom. Has anybody seen the Durrells on television? You see there's George and all the various names. Has anybody seen the Durrells on television? Well, my life was a little bit like that, but with more goats. And baby goats. Does anybody know what we call a baby goat? Someone here? Yes? No, that's a baby sheep. Yes, a kid. We will need that later. I'm making a joke later. Now, Jesus is the good shepherd. We have to do something serious today. Jesus is the good shepherd who calls his sheep by name. And that's exactly how shepherds in that part of the world still look after their animals. It's how I did. And maybe I think this might have been on Father Luigi Gentile's mind when he came here from Italy and lived in GRACE DIEU. You've all seen his portrait. Here's a version of it coming up here. As you go into the church, I thought the eyes were looking at me. They probably were. A very observant, holy man. I was probably talking, or I was late. Well, he came to here to talk about the church, and he would have been preaching in Shep Shed. Shep Shed is a famous place in the Doomsday Book, 1,000 years old, famous for sheep. Anyway, I was thinking about Father Gentile today, and the word gentile is an Italian word which means polite. It's where we get the English word gentleman from, but it actually comes from a Latin word for family. And Latin was the language used in ancient Rome. I've written that here, but actually a lot of Romans spoke Greek, but Latin was the proper language for ancient Rome. Now at Grace Dieu we learned a lot of Latin. We had Latin classes every day, and a lot of English words come from Latin. And one of my favorite English words, if I time this correctly, it will appear on the screen, but maybe I'm not going to time this correctly. One of my favorite English words comes from a Latin word, educere. Here it is, educere. Latin word meaning to lead out. I led out my goats from the mountains. Jesus leads out his sheep, he calls them by name. So look at that Latin word, educere, educa. Anybody got an idea what English word we could get out of that? Yes. Education. My visuals are going to be a bit slow, but we might actually find the visuals catch up with this very intelligent person over here. Education. To lead out. Education. There we are. Let's imagine all those sheep and goats being led out. It's a very good example of the word education. But the best bit of this word is that as a teacher, whatever I might say to you, what I want to learn about is what is in your mind. I want to lead out the ideas from your mind. I want to find out what you are thinking. And imagine our sheep, because one sheep, here they are, one sheep is following another sheep, and each sheep in turn is leading out yet another. What does that mean? We're all here to set each other an example, to lead each other, to be full of ideas, to be created. To be educated is to get ideas from each other, to have original thoughts, to do interesting, creative things. And some of you will soon be led out of Grace Dieu, and I hope you will take the good example that you have learned here and pass it on to your next school. So think of it. Children, parents, and teachers, we are all in this business of education. We lead one another by setting a good example, by doing our best, by having and sharing great ideas, but we do something else as well. As we learn, we become more of ourself. That's why my goats all had names, because each kid, this is the joke, each kid grows into an individual. Each child becomes an adult. So whether you are looking after goats or sheep or cats or alpacas, whether you are drawing or doing your homework or prep or not, you are becoming more yourself, and that is wonderful. So oh my goodness, I've got a stray goat there. So I want you today to make a positive commitment at the end of this term to make the most of your time here, to enjoy having ideas, to be creative, to enjoy reading, to work as hard as you can, and to play as hard as you can, and to share your experiences with each other. Thank you.